There's no reason it can't be summer in my heart. I just discovered, I never realized this. I'm already starting off on a tangent, but I never realized they've got little boats. I don't know if I ever noticed that before, but I like these little boats. Anywho, this is going to be a challenging couple of videos to make. I'm making 2 videos today, and this is going to be the introduction for both of them. A lot of you have noticed, many of you have noticed, and made comments over the years that I do have a lot of lovely lady friends. And I'm lucky to have a lot of lovely lady friends, among whom I'm not generally, romantically involved with or interested in necessarily. But that doesn't mean that I don't occasionally find a lady that I'm particularly interested in. Today's 2 videos are basically about why it's going to be kind of garage monologue-y. If you haven't picked up on it already and you've been around long enough, you probably know garage monologues are a thing that I do from time to time. And today is going to be 2 of them. One video dedicated to why I traditionally don't talk about my relationships, the women that I have seen or am seeing, and on and on about that. I thought we should address that and why I would like that to change, why I think it should change, and it's been an ongoing process. The other video is a video about a recent experience, a recent couple experiences, really, basically 2020. Believe it or not, I have had some romantic moments and what they taught me, and I feel like I've grown a lot this year. So that video will be about love that, for one reason or another, simply couldn't happen. And you're going to be surprised because I'm smiling a lot about this. It doesn't end the way maybe the smile makes you think it ended. But I think it's a very worthwhile story because I've grown so much. This video is about why I traditionally don't talk about my relationships and why I also think that needs to change. Of course, if you haven't watched the other one, you should go watch that now. The introductions are both the same, but that sameness ends right here. So let's go back in time a little bit, shall we, into why I don't traditionally talk about my relationships. The main reason is because I'm actually absolutely terrified to do so. If we're gonna get down to the core, the base level, I'm scared. And me doing this right now today is an act of looking that fear straight in the face and saying, F off. And I'm not saying that to you. I'm saying that to the fear, which maybe I should have looked over there when I said it. But there are some practical reasons as well. When I started out vlogging, I set a number of goals for myself. And I've talked about this ad nauseum at this point probably, but they were all personal goals, like wanting to be comfortable talking in front of the camera in any context at any time, showing up every day and making a video that I was as proud of as I could have been every day, practicing my storytelling, improving on that. Those were elements of why I got into daily vlogging and what the goals were out of it. And I accomplished a lot of those, but I also set some rules and some guidelines for myself, which weren't a lot. I wanted to try and be as vulnerable and as honest as I could safely be. And it took me a solid year to get to a place where I actually was kind of hitting that out of the park. But one of the arenas, not that I'm perfect at any of this, not that I'm perfect at any of this, maybe that's a disclaimer that I should have put in both of these. One of the rules that I put in place for myself early on was that I wasn't going to talk about relationships for 2 reasons. One, I didn't want to Taylor Swift myself, which is not the best analogy anyways, because she does have the pick of the litter, so I probably shouldn't have ever said that. Sorry, Taylor, if you ever see this, but I just didn't want to put myself in a position where people were scared to date me because they were worried I was going to sit down and divulge too much information. I wrote, my book on how I got to Paris, Sea of the Unknown, plug. I did write about some relationships in there, which was the first time I really shared about any of this stuff. And the woman that took up center stage as far as the romantic thread is concerned didn't ever tell me how she felt about the book, which kind of reinforced that fear a little bit. I definitely, but otherwise, for a long time, I never talked about it. And like I said, that was mostly because I didn't want to put myself in an awkward position where people just didn't trust me. Being trustworthy is kind of an important element to any relationship. And the other was because I didn't want to put myself in this weird position where I guess this was way too forward thinking and maybe a little bit bizarre, but I didn't want to give anybody a blueprint to figuring out how to manipulate me into liking them, which does sound super weird when you put it that way, but it's a thing. It's potential. You've heard of catfishing. I don't want to get catfished. So I just figured for safety's sake, it's kind of I don't want to show where I live and I don't want to show where my friends live, things like that. I don't want to, give away the keys to my heart, as it were. So those are kind of the rules that I set up for myself from the beginning, but underlying all of that really was a fear of rejection. I was really scared that that first one is pretty obvious as far as if I talk about relationships, will that make other potential future partners uninterested, reject me, and walk away. And then also that fear that by being vulnerable about it and talking about it, inherently, if you're talking about failed relationships, you're talking about something that you failed at, whether or not it's entirely or even mostly your fault that a relationship failed. It is hard to talk about. And especially in that first year, I struggled to talk about any of my failures. I didn't talk, like with the tech company that I started that flopped and the book deals that I had that fell through and whatever else. I didn't really have the book deals. I was there, but you know what I mean. If I had them, they wouldn't have fallen through anyways. Stories that I really should have shared much more openly and vulnerably that I didn't because I was scared of being perceived as a failure. And I think the relational side of that, especially being single and in your 30s, is very similar. It's like the way I grew up, I thought I was going to be married by the time I was like 24. I never really thought about having kids. It's not something that's really on my radar, to be honest. That's another thing that I'm, not super quick to share publicly. That but like this year has been, and you'll see this in the other video, this year has been a year of reinforcing the importance of honesty and vulnerability in being free, if nothing else. If not getting what you want, at least being free from things like that fear. There's also a lot of shame in it. So it's not even just the fear of being seen as a failure or the fear of failing in public, which are both terrifying and things that I've tried to attack head on through vlogging in particular. It's something that I think is really important. This is kind of not the final frontier, I'm sure, but this is a big one for me talking about this, something that I've held on to because, I am scared of being single for the rest of my life. It's not what I want. And I've been wrestling with that a lot. And I am scared of what it's kind of more of a fear of like, what does that mean about me? What does it say about me? And that ties into the sense of shame. Something that I don't think I ever really realized I struggled with until recently, reading a book about relationships and masculinity in particular, and recognizing myself in kind of this cycle of shame and unwillingness to talk about ourselves, our vulnerabilities. And the antidote to shame is bringing these things out into the light, is talking about them, is being honest about them. And that's what ultimately frees you. Obviously, having a space that's free of judgment and people that support you helps. And thankfully, I have that, which is part of what that other video is about as well. But I was able to step out of that shame around the failures in business, the failures in my creative pursuits, the feeling that I was a failure in becoming like the man I want to be, but also the professional I want to be, the storyteller that I want to be. And as I step further and further out of those, it feels like it's only right that I step out of this, shadow of shame as well. But that was also reinforced by the way that I was raised. I think a big part of it too for me, this is something that I shared in my book that goes probably into more depth than this, but I think it's important to talk about a little bit, is the way that I was raised and the way that I always saw relationships, I think are a little bit different than at least the way society tells you should interact with women through popular culture, movies and songs and all that stuff. And so I actually kind of came at it from an extreme position where, for one, I didn't think I was my goal was not to kiss anybody until I got married. I was just trying to do the math in my head. When did I actually kiss somebody? The first time I kissed somebody really was when I think I was 26. That should tell you a lot right there. And I won't get into the details of what happened after that and what the timelines were, but I was a little bit of a late bloomer on that front because I was fairly religious as I grew up. This is not something that I've ever really talked about on my vlog, and maybe that is something that we can get into later, but it definitely left me with this sense of like, okay, like this is the way that I have to go about this, relational thing. And as you probably noticed, as somebody who, vlogged daily for 3 years and all the other random stuff that I've done along the way, I kind of take some things to extremes, especially when I'm kind of passionate about them. And that was a good example of that. But it wasn't driven by like healthy reasoning. It wasn't driven by healthy desires. There was kind of a bargain being made, I thought. Like if I'm going to be this good person, this pure person, then I'm going to get this thing in exchange in the form of like a relationship, marriage, whatever. And that's just not how the world works, as it turns out. But that's not to say that like, even though I shifted out of that mindset, the detritus of the shift was completely, alleviated in that moment. The reality is that a lot of that was left behind. So even feeling, basically there's this cycle that I talked about, I think I talked about this in the book, but like I fell into this cycle of if I felt attracted to somebody, there was something shameful about that. And if I let that person know, not only was it shameful, but I was giving them power over me because then they knew like my dirty little secret that I liked them. And then that was bad because now not only am I being bad, but I'm exposed to this person. And if they like me, then we've entered into a cycle of shame and I've caused that in this other person. And it's just like, it's not good. It's not good. it's painful. It's painful to even think about that. That's where my brain came from. It kind of inhibited a lot of relationships. And it's not to say I didn't date like in college, but I was not a good boyfriend, if you could even call me boyfriend, to the women that I did date. And I think this internal struggle and fighting against basically this kind of internal war that I faced very much defined why I didn't want to talk about these things, because I didn't want to bring them in the open. Because for one, I was ashamed of it. I thought I was the only person that was struggling with this, and I thought that, like, you know, by doing so, I would not only out myself as some sort of a horrible person, but that I would also, I don't know, affect other people negatively as well. It's a weird thing. It's a weird cycle. And it is the cycle of shame. Like you pull away from people, you try to hide from people, and that causes you to feel even more isolated, because you are even more isolated, when what you need to do is try to find people that you can talk to and bring it to, which thankfully I've been able to do through friendships and through therapy this year. And it's just been an ongoing process for a long time, something that I've been trying to attack as directly as possible. But I've only recently, really in the last year, maybe a little bit more than a year, really started to go after directly. And the things that I've been trying to internalize more recently have been that I do deserve to be loved, that I do deserve to be chosen, that I do deserve all these things that I don't feel like I do. And there's a longer story to be told behind that, the reasons why I think, and that I'm learning that I struggle with these ideas and these concepts. If nothing else, try to apply the reasoning and the logic that when I look at my friends, the people that I care about, and how much I love them and how much I think they deserve the best, trying to see myself in the same light is also really, really helpful. And that self-talk, it feels silly, but standing there and telling yourself, like, I deserve to be loved, is something that I would have felt really awkward even saying, especially on camera, until recently. And I've decided to go ahead and just go for it. And I think it's had an impact. The other story, the other video is going to have, a little bit more detail on that. But I wanted to share this, and I wanted to share that moving forward, I want to figure out how to talk about this. That other video is an example of how I think maybe I can do that, but also it is still tricky territory. As somebody who lives a fairly public life, I mean, not that I'm not like a superstar, but when you think about it, these videos, there are thousands of people that see whatever I put out, and a lot of people here in Paris, a lot of people coming to Paris, hopefully someday, the borders open back up again, that know who I am. And I've got a lot of stories that I guess I could share, that I probably should share. I was going to make a video about dating in Paris as requested. It's been requested a lot. I've never been okay with it. I'm going to be okay with it now. I'll make that video. Today is my stamp of promise. But I have, there's one where there was a guy that completely crashed a date. A fan of mine who decided that it was an appropriate time when I was sitting with a woman at a bar to barge in, and he freaked her out to the point that she literally packed up her stuff and left. That date was doomed anyways, but it definitely was what a way to end. But I want to find a good and appropriate way to talk about both how I'm, growing and developing as a person, because I think that's one of the main points of this entire vlogging experiment that I've been doing for the last few years. And also to, just share the experiences and the stories, because I think that they're good stories. They're not necessarily stories that need to be hidden. And again, for whatever reason, whether it's because I, am embarrassed to be single, whatever it is, whatever the reason is that I've been scared to put these out there, it needs to go away, and I need to get over it. But that doesn't mean that I'm gonna completely throw caution to the wind. So if I'm dating somebody, I'm not gonna vlog about it, especially not first dates and so forth. And there will come a time, when I think I talked about this when I talked about the French woman that I was dating last year. There does come a time where it's okay, well, this either needs to be public or not. You kind of gotta get off the pot. And that was kind of a sign for me. That was one of them. My discomfort with being public with my relationship with her was kind of a sign to me that it's not going so well. And similarly, if I'm dating somebody, I want to give that a window. I don't know how long. I guess it depends on the person and the relationship, but a couple of months probably at least, to just be what it is, to get to know somebody and to get to a place where it feels natural to live life on camera together, which is that's also a weird part of the whole vlogging thing, and that I've been mildly concerned about, but I'm not too worried about anymore. Am I guaranteeing my singleness by intimidating people out of dating me because they're like, oh my God, I don't want to date somebody in public? I don't know, we'll figure it out together. I think that's the main thing, is that if I'm dating somebody, as happened with that woman in particular, it becomes a part of the conversation. And it just says, it's like, okay, let's talk about this. Like when, where, how, and we decide to do that together. And I do look forward to doing that with somebody at some point, having those discussions and figuring things out. But, until then, it doesn't help that we're in a pandemic right now. Meeting people is freaking not easy to do for obvious reasons. So that's just a little bit about why I haven't talked about it in the past, what's going on in me and changing that. I've got a couple of stories in that other video that I hope highlight that pretty well. And I'm actually really happy with where I'm at in like a relational sense, even though I'm still single, and that does not look like it's changing anytime soon. We're stuck in a freaking pandemic and life is weird and crazy. It's been a really good time to sit and stop and reflect and really face myself, my fears, the things that have really been hobbling me. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that coming out of this and talking about it as part of that exercise is freeing myself from those chains, whether that's shame, whether that's fear, whether that's whatever it is. Like I'm done living in fear of any kind, and I'm done inhibiting myself. As long as they're bad inhibitions. Good inhibitions are still important, but I'm just done with all that. I'm done. And I think it's a very important part of living a healthy life and growing and becoming a better, more mature, saner human being. And that's important to me. As for what it means to be a man, we can talk about some other time. That's something I've been thinking about a lot for years as well. And something that that's another discussion that I want to open up, the ideas of masculinity, but we'll talk about that another time. I guess in both of these videos, my hope is that it encourages reflection and thought, and, that you would take some steps, be brave, find somebody that you love and reach out to them. Just have an honest conversation. Just imagine if somebody you loved came to you and wanted to talk about whatever it is that's going on, whatever it is that you're afraid of that's holding you back, and they confided in you. How would you feel? You'd feel honored. You'd feel, you would, if it's somebody you love, you would want to help them by supporting them and sticking with them. If you have somebody in your life that you think might be like that, I mean, you can never know, I guess, in some ways, but I would encourage that you reach out and take a risk, especially in this day and age when we need each other more than ever, and we really could use some risk-taking and some just outreach and connection. Yeah, so I guess that's that for this video. I'm going to record the other video now because I did this one first. But I hope that you're doing well, and I hope that you're having a wonderful Thanksgiving, because I think this is going to release on Thanksgiving. And I was going to say this at the beginning of the video and I forgot. Maybe I'll say at the beginning of the other one, but I'm very, very thankful just for where I'm at today, how much I've been able to grow, and all of the friends and family who have been a part of that growth and been supportive of me and just put up with my garbage, because I feel like that's a big part of it too. And that I've known, but I think that this is hopefully part of the solution, that in processing all this and in also just not yet being the man I want to be, I've not been the man I've wanted to be. And I'm so grateful that my friends and my family have stuck by me that whole time, because that also encourages me and helps me to feel like, I'm worthy of friendship and I'm worthy of love from my family. Because even though I'm not perfect, and boy, have I not been perfect, they still love me. So that makes me feel good. Anyways, I'm just going to bask in that for a second, and I will start recording that other video in a second, and I will see you bright and early one of these days sometime soon. Take care of you. And if you don't feel like, you have anything you need to unburden yourself of, maybe you just reach out and check on somebody you love anyways. It's Thanksgiving. Be thankful. That's not where this is supposed to go, but that's where it is now. So, happy Thanksgiving.